Have you ever felt like you're just wired differently? Like you see the world in these deep, complex layers while everyone else seems to be moving in a straight line? Well, if that feeling of being an outsider sounds familiar, we're going to dig into why that might not be a bug, but actually a core feature of a very particular kind of mind.
This quote, man, it just gets right to the heart of it, doesn't it? It's that feeling of isolation that comes from a brain that's constantly analyzing, questioning, and feeling things so deeply. It's a mind that never, ever gets to clock out. It's why so many people get told they're overreacting, when the truth is, their reality is just tuned to a much higher intensity.
All right, so let's talk about the word gifted. When we hear it, we usually picture some kind of superpower, right? Effortless success, perfect grades, a life without any real struggle. But the research we're looking at today, it paints a much, much more complicated and honestly, a much more challenging picture.
And this is the great myth we all buy into. The assumption is that being super intelligent is like having this protective shield that just deflects all of life's problems. But what if that shield is actually hiding a massive vulnerability? What if this very idea is causing real harm by making a deep, painful struggle completely invisible?
So how do we get past this myth? Well, it starts by basically throwing out the old definition of gifted. We have to stop thinking about it as just a high score on a test. We need to start seeing it for what it is, a unique and very real internal human experience.
So, here's the crucial point. It is not just about being smart. This definition from the Columbus Group points to two really key things: asynchronous development and heightened intensity. What does that mean? It means you're developing out of sync with your peers, and you're feeling everything, from joy to injustice, on a whole other level.
And this right here really shows you the core conflict. Just imagine having the brain of a 30-year-old, the emotions of a 15-year-old, but you're all packed into the body of a 10-year-old. That's asynchrony. Your mind can wrap itself around huge existential ideas, but you might not have the emotional tools to actually cope with them. That mismatch inside your own head can be incredibly lonely.
Okay, so what does that heightened intensity we just talked about actually look like in day-to-day life? Well, a researcher named Kazimierz Dabrowski broke it all down into 5 distinct categories. He called them overexcitabilities, which are basically the channels through which reality is experienced with a much, much higher voltage.
These are the engines that power that different reality. Let's break them down. Psychomotor isn't just being hyper. It's emotional tension that comes out as talking a mile a minute or just having to move. Sensory isn't just being picky. It's a clothing tag feeling like sandpaper or a piece of music moving you to tears. Intellectual is that relentless drive to ask why and solve every puzzle. Imaginational is living in this incredibly rich world of daydreams and metaphors. And emotional, this isn't about being dramatic. It's feeling profound empathy, forming deep attachments, and having this burning sense of injustice.
And here is exactly where the problems start. Because from the outside, all this intense internal wiring gets totally misinterpreted. That psychomotor energy gets labeled ADHD. The sensory overload is called sensory processing disorder. And that deep, profound emotional intensity, that just gets dismissed as being too dramatic. Your inner reality is treated like a disease because it doesn't fit neatly into the standard little boxes.
Okay, buckle up, because this brings us to the most startling and honestly, the most provocative idea in all of this research: the deep biological link between the gifted experience and the experience of complex trauma.
Yeah, just let that sink in for a second. The research is proposing that because of those heightened intensities we just talked about, the gifted brain can process even kind of normal, everyday stressful events in a way that is biologically almost identical to how a neurotypical brain processes severe trauma. The biological overlap here is just stunning. I mean, look at this. Both the gifted brain and a brain dealing with complex trauma show changes in the exact same key areas. We're talking about the parts that handle our stress response, our memory, our decision-making. The end result is a nervous system that can be perpetually stuck on high alert, fight, flight, or freeze, even when there's no obvious danger in sight. So, if the biology is this clear, why on earth is this experience so constantly overlooked? Why is it so misunderstood, even by the very professionals that people are supposed to turn to for help? Well, a 2022 dissertation by Dr. Pamela Hunsberger decided to find out. She went out and surveyed a bunch of mental health clinicians and asked them a really simple question. When it comes to trauma, what role does a high IQ play? And wow, the results are pretty eye-opening.
Only a tiny fraction, we're talking just over 6%, saw a high IQ as a potential risk factor. But half, a full 50%, believed it was actually a protective factor. They bought right into that myth of the intellectual shield.
Let me put that another way for you. This means that almost 94% of the mental health professionals in this survey might not even recognize the vulnerability that can come with this kind of brain. They're working under the assumption that being smarter only makes you stronger. And that creates this tragic, painful gap. The very people you'd go to for help might not have the right framework to even begin to understand your reality. And that leads directly to invalidation, being told you're just making a big deal out of nothing, and to misdiagnosis, where your natural intensity gets treated like it's a disorder. This quote from a case study just shows you the real human cost of this blind spot. Can you imagine processing the world with so much intensity that you literally develop symptoms of trauma only to have a professional tell you that you're just spoiled and dramatic? The feeling of being so completely unseen is just profound. So, where does all this leave us? Look, the point here isn't to label this as some kind of curse. The point is to reframe it as a form of neurodiversity, one that has its own unique strengths and its own unique vulnerabilities. It is not a personal failing. It's just a different way of being that deserves to be understood. Which really just leaves us with one final big question. If even the experts can miss this, how many brilliant minds out there are feeling like aliens simply because the rest of the world hasn't bothered to learn their language yet?